Class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing Game 81 of the regular season between the San Jose Sharks and the Edmonton Oilers, in which the Sharks have lost 9-2. And really, the only bit of good news to take away from such a game is that this is not the final game of the regular season for the San Jose Sharks. They do have an opportunity on Thursday against the weaker Calgary Flames to end this season on a bit more of a high note, because this game was anything but that. The San Jose Sharks came into Edmonton and got completely destroyed and embarrassed by an Edmonton Oilers squad that is gearing up for a playoff run coming up in just a few days. This was a type of game reminiscent to games played much earlier on into the season for the San Jose Sharks, like back in that 11-game losing streak where they had that back-to-back loss to the Vancouver Canucks and the Pittsburgh Penguins, where they gave up 10 goals against in both of those games. The only reason here tonight that the Oilers didn't manage 10 goals against is because coming into the third period, the Oilers basically just gave up and had mercy on the San Jose Sharks, knowing that even with full 20 minutes of free reign, the Sharks would never be able to make up the 8-goal deficit that they came into the third period with. Zetterlund would score one, but that would be the only goal scoring in that final frame. And so the Oilers, they don't go for the 10 spot, but 9 goals is definitely enough to really give a wake-up call to this San Jose Sharks organization, which is just to show the massive gap that there is between these two franchises and where they stand in the current grand scheme of things in the NHL. The Edmonton Oilers might not be the best team in the league, but they are one of those teams that is vying for a Stanley Cup victory, in that 5 or 6 team group. Meanwhile, the San Jose Sharks aren't even competitive to make a playoff spot, never mind actually competing for a Stanley Cup. In fact, the Sharks are the last place team in the entire league. This is not a franchise that is 1 or 2 pieces away from getting to where the Oilers currently find themselves. This is a franchise that is 5, 6, 7 big pieces away from actually being able to turn that corner. For a group that has only really committed to a rebuild over these last couple of years once Mike Greer was hired as a general manager, it just goes to show that this is not going to be something that will happen just like that. This is not a team that is suddenly going to come into next year and actually be able to make and compete in the playoffs. It is likely a good 2, if not 3 or 4 years down the line before the Sharks even sniff a playoff spot. And indeed, it was really apparent here tonight, the massive difference in skill levels between these two franchises, and it's the type of game that you would expect against other really, really good teams in the league, like if the Sharks went up against the Colorado Avalanche or the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Boston Bruins, the Florida Panthers, any of these types of behemoths in the league. The Sharks are immensely outclassed. When it comes to the players to talk about, there really isn't much to say, which is why this video is going to end up being rather short. As I mentioned, pretty much all of these lines were just dominated when they were on the ice. We can talk about the Zetterlund, Granlund, and Eklund line, the Lund line, so to speak. They had been quite good over their past couple of games, but here tonight, once they're facing off against either the Connor McDavid line or the Leon Draisaitl line on the ice, it again is just going to show how much worse, no offense to them of course, how much worse they are than lines that feature the literal best player in the entire league. And so it is not a surprise to see them get completely dominated as they did, and the rest of the lines that are already made weaker by the fact that the Sharks are overloading on their top line is definitely also quite exposed. So there's not really much of a reason to focus on any individual player outside of the couple of choices that David Quinn and the organization made for the lineup here tonight. The Sharks, with 2 games remaining on the schedule here tonight against the Oilers and the next one against the Calgary Flames, both of them are on the road, so this is a road trip to Canada to end off the season. The San Jose Sharks made a few emergency call-ups as a couple of players were put onto the injured reserve, so to speak, likely more so maintenance of small things that have accumulated over the season, like Jan Ruda and these types of players. And so they made a few call-ups, the first of which, on the forward side of things, was Danil Gushin. Played 2 games last year, played another 2 games this year, this now being his 3rd of the season, and what was quite nice to see from him is that he actually managed to score. It wasn't the nicest goal, not really a replicable goal, something that is going to work every single time, but it's a puck that found its way through the Edmonton goalie Stuart Skinner to make the game slightly respectable, I guess, at the beginning of the second second period, and Gushchin honestly was one of the better Sharks forwards. That's not saying much. It was not difficult to be better than most of the Sharks forwards here tonight, but Gushchin did have at least a bit of jump into his game. And while, one thing that needs to be said is that it is not easy to score goals or even score points at the NHL level. You ask any player here in the league, it is very, very tough to be able to do that, especially jumping in here for your first few games in your career. And yet, Danil Gushchin over this season and last, in the 5 games he has played, he's got 4 points. That's quite good at this point. So while it's not super consistent or anything like that, not things that you're really going to be immensely proud of, like the goal here tonight, as he will himself admit that that's one that just squeaks in, a bit of a lucky one. The fact that he manages to keep up a close to point per game pace over those 5 games is quite impressive in itself, and we shall see if he does get another opportunity in the lineup come next game. I was somewhat surprised to see his ice time get heavily limited in the third period here tonight. It felt as though there's zero reason to do that. It's not as though you're trying to defend well or score that many goals. I don't know why Gushchin would have his ice time limited in that regard, especially since, like I said, he was one of the better forwards on the night for San Jose, but whatever. One other substitution I was surprised about is that Justin Bailey was dropped out of the lineup. He's not one of the players who was injured for maintenance and didn't travel with the team, if I'm not mistaken. I would hope that he is injured just for the sake of the fact that there's zero other justification for why a player like Studnicka would stay in the lineup over Justin Bailey, but that's neither here nor there. The other call-up for the San Jose Sharks happened on defense. Jan Ruda, like I said, not traveling with San Jose, so they bring in a defenseman. It is not Shakir Mukhamadullin, as he is also injured in the AHL, missing the rest of this season. Instead, it is Jack Thompson, acquired from the Anthony Duclair trade from a couple of months ago from the Tampa Bay Lightning, and Thompson had a really, really rough debut. That's not really a testament of him, not necessarily a comment of him in particular, because the defense for the San Jose Sharks was completely abused here tonight. But one thing that was kind of humorous, I guess you could say, was the welcome to the NHL moment that Thompson had on his first shift here for the San Jose Sharks, as found himself on the ice against Connor McDavid, who made him look completely silly with his elite level speed. Fastest player, or one of the fastest players in the game, just zooms right past Thompson for that goal. Definitely a wake-up call, I guess you could say, for Jack Thompson, who then still continued to struggle for the rest of the night. But like I said, that's not really a standout from any of the other defensemen for the San Jose Sharks. It was just a rough night in general. And then when it comes to the goaltending side, the other call-up, due to Mackenzie Blackwood also being injured, was Romanov coming up from the Barracuda. Now, he was not expected to actually make an appearance here tonight. Devin Cooley got the opportunity, but Cooley had a rough night. This is a combination of a couple of bad goals. Don't want to necessarily leave him completely off the hook. Definitely a worse night than he had in his previous performance compared to against the Seattle Kraken. But on the other hand, the Sharks defense was absolutely horrid in front of Devin Cooley. There were I believe the last 3 goals that the Oilers scored were on 3 consecutive 2-on-1 situations where Cooley had practically no chance on, and multiple of the other goals were also pretty much no chance types of saves. Cooley was left completely hung out to dry here by the San Jose Sharks defense. They did him zero favors. In fact, they pretty much stabbed him in the back in a manner of speaking. And so he would end up getting pulled after 8 goals against, where Romanov would step in. He let in 1 more goal and then managed to, I guess, shut things down for the rest of the night. Not as though there was much of a challenge, because like I said, the Oilers practically stopped playing for the last 20 minutes of this game, but I guess nice outing for him anyway. But that will do it for this review, if you could really call it much of that. The San Jose Sharks will be back in action on Thursday, like I said, for the final game of the regular season against the Calgary Flames, a team that is outside of the playoff picture, many points behind the Edmonton Oilers, so the Sharks will hopefully be able to put up a bit more of a fight against them, and we can be in for a slightly more interesting end to this regular season. Class dismissed.